like to sing along as we sing Majesty. Most of you may know what this is, some of you probably don't. You'll pick it up if you come here a few more nights. Okay, praise God. He was born in New York City a number of years ago, and he was brilliant. And at the age of 22, he began what would become a very, very successful investment securities firm on Wall Street. That's what Wall Street's known for. And he was there, and he built a very successful one at a very young age. And by its very nature, investment industry is an arena where you need to have a lot of trust, right? You're taking money of yours and giving it to someone else. There's trust involved, is it not? Right? Just by definition, it is. And in order to deposit your money in a bank, you need to be able to trust them whether they're going to do what's right with that. Okay? So there's a level of trust involved in investment that's pretty high. And when you get into investment securities, those are even larger numbers. And people in that business are handling very large sums of money. Now, unfortunately for the people who invested their money, this individual, this brilliant young man, right, as he moved up the ladder, his wealth management business was not all that it appeared to be. It appeared to be great and was doing fantastic, right? Late in the year 2008, it appeared to, it came crashing down in 2008. And when you invest in the money in the bank, what it does is it takes the money and then it lends it to someone else, right, at a higher interest. That's how they make money, and that's all legal. They take the money, and that's how it's supposed to be. They give you, right, like maybe like what, when you put money in the bank, about maybe like 8 or 9%, is that what they give you? 1.5%. That's going up, 1.5. They may charge you for a loan 6, 7, 8, 9, 10%, whatever, but they'll give you 1 or 1.5%. And that's how they make money, and that's how it works. Okay, and that's legal, and that's how it should be. But when Bernie Madoff had been operating his little Ponzi scheme, that's not how it worked, okay? What they do in a Ponzi scheme is you get people to invest the money with you, right? And you're promising to pay them back, and how you're paying them back is by telling somebody else, and you're investing from them and paying them with the money from the second person. That's not how it's supposed to be, okay? And that's against the law, and that's like robbing Peter to pay Paul, as they say, right? That's a Ponzi scheme. That can't go on indefinitely. Eventually, that's going to crumble. Okay, you follow that? Eventually, it's going to get caught up. It can't go on forever. And in this case here, it went on pretty far because there was $65 billion involved in this. It's a lot of money. And $65 billion, and many, many people, thousands of individuals lost a lot, lost it all, some of them. In total, $18 billion was lost in this. How much is $18 billion? If I were to take out a $100 bill right now and go 100, 200, one every second, 60 seconds in a minute, right? 60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours in a day, 365 days in a year, almost 6 years counting that $100 bill is $18 billion. Figure it out what you calculate, you figure it out. A lot of people trusted this man with their hard-earned money and their family fortune, sometimes with everything they had. And sadly, that trust was misplaced. And in many cases, people didn't only lose their fortune, some lost their lives. Okay, so it's very sad. The man's still in jail right now, of course, and he's trying to get off, actually. Just recently was asking for Donald Trump to get him to get off earlier than his 150-year sentence. But you need to be careful who you trust, right, in life. Right? That's a lesson that we've all learned in some way or another growing up. You need to learn who to trust, and I've been burned in my life a number of times, and it's kind of hard to trust people, is it not? It seems that in days gone by, trust wasn't needed on the same level as it is now, okay? There was a time not so long ago when you could, leave your doors open, right? You can leave your cars unlocked and your windows open. You can't do that anymore. You can't do that anymore. Now you make sure everything's locked up tighter than a drum. We don't trust people like we used to. And the key word is trust tonight. I want you to focus on trust. Tonight's topic is, can God be trusted? People trusted Bernie Madoff, believing that if they gave him a whole lot of money, he'd give them a whole lot more, right? It's always fun to make free money, right? It's always exciting. It's tantalizing. I think everyone at some point or another fell for that. But while some investors make out quite well, others experience the truth of that old saying, if something is too good to be true, it probably is, right? Probably is too good to be true. Who can you trust? It's a fair question to ask, and can you trust God? Now, if you were raised reading the Bible, right, and going to church, and you call yourself a Christian, you would probably say, I feel like I can. I can trust God, right? I can feel I can trust the Bible. Well, let's stop and consider that the Bible makes some pretty big claims. Even people who say that they're a Christian, people who say that they trust God, there are claims that are made in the Bible that maybe not even they have thought about and say, well, that's a pretty big claim, right? The Bible tells us that Jesus is coming back to this earth. It tells us that God will take care of us. It says that there is a heaven, right? All these things. As a matter of fact, let's be elemental about it. The Bible says that there is a God, right? There is a God. Yet you've never seen him face to face, have you? All right? You've never spoken to him across the kitchen table, have you? And if you were to pose these questions to an unbeliever, they would probably be like, I'm not convinced that there is a God, or you're crazy, there is no God, right? But the Bible contains 66 books, 1,189 chapters, and more than 31,000 verses, claiming some very amazing things. It claims that there's a God who spoke the world into existence from nothing. Just spoke it into existence. So the Bible claims, right? Are you're willing to go out and hit up your co-worker at work who's an atheist or not a believer and tell him God spoke everything into existence? That's what the Bible says, right? It claims that there's a God who spoke, but also that there long ago there was a flood. Flood that covered not just some part of maybe South Carolina or Texas somewhere, but a flood that covered the whole world. That's a pretty big claim, is it not? The Bible makes that claim. The Bible says that there's a resurrection took place from a man named Jesus, right? Who had been nailed to a cross, was raised from the dead 3 days later, right? The Bible makes that claim. A dead man came back to life. And not only Jesus, there's stories of a Lazarus and a boy from a widow of Nain, that they were raised from the dead. The Bible encourages that we'll experience peace when we choose to believe in God. There's a lot of things that it tells us. It makes amazing promises. It promises forgiveness from sin, the Bible promises, and eternal life to all who repented from their sins. These are big claims. Imagine if they're not true. Imagine that for a minute. Imagine if the atheists are right and the Bible cannot be trusted. There are people on death row who say, I feel terrible about the crimes that I've committed, but I've asked for forgiveness from God, and so I believe that he's forgiven me. Isn't that a wonderful thing, right? Can God forgive somebody that bad? If he can't, then God can't forgive Moses and David because they killed somebody too, okay? They were both sinners too. So there are people on death row who believe that God has forgiven them, but what if God hasn't forgiven them, right? And it's all a lie. As we look at the Bible tonight, we will recognize that it says many, many incredible things. It says a lot of things, and it promises a lot of things. Can we trust that word is the question. We need to be able to trust the Bible. Otherwise, we will not be able to believe all these wonderful promises, right? If we find that there's something up with the Bible and it's not to be believed, or as some atheists will say, that the Bible is not something that's trustworthy, it's just a book written on some paper by some people years ago, they could have been crazy, who cares? Just people, how they saw the world from their primitive mind view, and they see the world this way, and they wrote it down and invented some story. And then, is that the case? Or is there something we can really, really trust? Really trust? What is it that makes the Bible true? How can we say, I'm confident that this book is true? Let's go to the Bible and look at what God says. God makes some great claims about the Bible. Those of you who have your Bible, I encourage you to look along. Many of you have actual Bibles. That's fantastic. Those of you who have it on their phone, a lot easier, to do that, easy to carry around. I always like to have the thing in my hand, but, the phone is very good too, especially it's convenient. Isaiah chapter 46, verses 9 and 10 says, remember the former things of old. For I am God, and there is no other. I am God, there is none like me. Continuing, he says, declaring the end from the beginning. Okay? He's telling us what's going to happen at the end from way back in the beginning. Okay, declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. God sticks his neck out here. He does, doesn't he? He puts himself in the line and says, I am God. And to prove it, he says, I'll tell you the end from the beginning. I'll tell you things that haven't happened yet. Can you get someone else to do that? I can, perhaps guess at some things, right? Under certain circumstances, you probably could do that. You could tell the future in some ways, right? If I were to take, a plate full of cookies and put it on the living room table there and invited a bunch of kids in, I can probably predict what's going to happen, right? I can tell you what's going to happen to those cookies, right? Okay? Not, it's certain things are pretty easy to predict, right? But when you start getting far away and predicting things, hundreds and thousands of years before people were born and what's going to happen, that puts it on a different level. I don't know anyone who can do that other than God. So beyond the obvious, what can we do? Okay, there's fortune tellers, right? Have you ever seen that? You can call up on those lines there, right? Something that you can call. It's $1.99 for a minute, right? And they'll tell you all that tell you the numbers to play, right? Try number 32, 29, whatever, that kind of stuff. And God doesn't work that way, does he? When you dig in the Bible, you find that what we look at tonight forms the foundation for really all of the apocalyptic prophecy, the end time prophecy in the Bible. Everything. It's an introductory. It's an introductory to, it's a prophecy in the Bible that helps us to see that God knows just what's going on. He knows the end from the beginning. He has everything in his hands. We can trust the Bible. And as we go into deeper stuff and deeper prophecies on other nights, we will see that, hey, that foundational prophecy we learned on the first night is something that I'm going to fall back on over and over again as you go into it. The prophecies of Daniel chapter 7, 8, 9, chapter 11, Revelation chapter 13, 14, 16, 17, 18, and 19. The prophecies in there are all understood as you understand Daniel chapter 2, as we're going to cover tonight. If you don't understand that, then you'll have a hard time understanding those really important ones that talk about our life. There's seats right here in the front if you'd like. There's a few seats, so come on in. If you feel comfortable, sit down. So remember, we're trying to see if God can be trusted. That's the whole point. We're trying to see if God can be trusted and his word can be trusted. So let's turn to chapter 2 of Daniel. Daniel chapter 2. I want to see if we can validate what God has said. And if what God has said is true, then we'll see it tonight. If it isn't, then we'll see that instead, won't we? Daniel chapter 2, verse 1. We're going to read most of the chapter. You can read the whole chapter yourself later. Again, we're trying to keep it to an hour, right? Everything tonight, we will. We'll do our best to do that. Daniel chapter 2, verse 1, the Bible says, now in the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, and his spirit was so troubled that his sleep left him. Okay? I will try and just not go off and give you a bunch of details on Babylon and the issues here. I do a seminar on Daniel from 1 through 12 and every verse in it, and I love that seminar, but this is not that. We're touching on the highlights so we can understand the major ones in Daniel and Revelation, okay? So if I get yanked off a little bit, just remind me, keep going, because I love to give a lot of information about ancient Babylon and about Nebuchadnezzar. It really intrigues me very much, the book of Daniel. It's an awesome book. Okay, so now in the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, and his spirit was so troubled that his sleep left him. Then the king gave the command to call the magicians, the astrologers, the sorcerers, and Chaldeans to tell the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king. And the king said to them, I have had a dream, and my spirit is anxious to know the dream. Then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will give the interpretation. The Chaldeans was just a form of, we'll say like a charmer in some way, someone who could do some kind of little spells with things and tell you the future based on what resulted from that. It says, tell your servants the dream, and we will give the interpretation. Very reasonable, right? Tell us the dream, we'll let you know all about it. Tell us you had a dream with, who knows, brown frogs that were jumping around. Well, okay, the brown means that things will happen at a certain time in the year. Oh, maybe in the fall when the leaves turn brown, and the frogs mean that you'll be leaving fast from here and going off to war, something like that. Something silly they'll come up with, right? Tell us the dream, and then we'll give you interpretation. This is one of history's most famous case of amnesia, though, right? The king experienced something but later couldn't remember. You ever happened to you where you had a dream maybe or something that happened to you where you couldn't remember exactly what happened and it bothered you? Sometimes it happens as we get a little older, like I wanted to say something, but I can't remember what it was. That ever happen to you? It happens a lot, right? Yeah, more than I'd like to admit, right? Yeah, sitting there like, I wanted to say something. Oh, I know it's something good. I can't remember. It'll come back to me and you'll leave, and that's what it was. Well, here he couldn't remember it. He couldn't remember it at all, but he knew it was something big. It was something important, something very, very critical in his life, how big it was. And more often than not, if you had some kind of confusing dream, a lot of times, we just simply relate that to maybe eating too much pizza before we went to bed, right? Maybe some bad meal we ate. But this wasn't a pizza dream. This was a God dream. God placed this in his mind. And the reason it was significant was that the ancient kings believed that gods spoke to them. The kings believed that they had a special place with the gods back then, and they spoke to them in dreams. That's why they had all these people to interpret dreams. You wouldn't have people interpreting dreams for your average person, as the kings were so special. There are some seats in the front. I'd like to encourage, to come sit. There's about 8 or 10 seats back up here. So this dream here, being a God dream, Nebuchadnezzar believed that's what was happening, that he had the gods, we'll say lowercase g, God speaking to him, right? And he had a stunning dream, and he woke up and he believed that the gods were speaking to me. They're speaking to me, but I can't remember it. And he was right. God was speaking to him. He called his wise men together, his counselors, to have them explain what that was. And after all, that's what they were paid for, right? Daniel chapter 2, verse 5 now. The Bible says, the king answered and said to the Chaldeans, my decision is firm. If you do not make known the dream to me and its interpretation, you shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made an ash heap. Pretty powerful, isn't it? Yeah, he's asking, say, wait a minute, anyone can kind of tell me something when I tell them something to give me an answer, but I'm looking for you. You've got special connections with the gods, don't you? I need you to tell me what I dreamed. Things started getting a little serious there. However, if you tell the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts, rewards, and great honor. I'm not certain if they were worried about that at that point. Okay, because he was very, very serious. Their lives were in danger. And the gifts and honor I don't really care about. I just want to save my neck at this point. Therefore, tell me the dream and its interpretation. So he wants both things. Tell me and I shall reward you. Don't tell me, you shall die. Nebuchadnezzar wasn't kidding. No, he meant it, and that's what made it so difficult. The ancient kings would do that. They would take someone's head off, right, in a moment. People who worked in the palace will say they had a very special job. They got privileges. They got better food. They got better places to live, but they also lost their life pretty fast, okay? So it was a risky job in some ways. So here he is, and he's asking his counselors, and he can't remember, and they were stuck. They were stuck, and they were worried. So you can have the people out there who can tell you what you want to hear sometimes, right? They can go out there and they can go against Bible counsel. God says, do not do this, okay? And there's a reason why he says do not do this. And we'll cover this a little later in another night. All these crystal ball gazers and palm readers and psychics, the ones you can call up and pay for to get your information. God doesn't work that way. God does not operate that way. Let's look at what God says in Proverbs 3. 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. Now, if it said he might direct your paths, right? If it said he might, that'd be pretty good, right? You can go into God and say, there's a good chance that you're going to help me with this, right? I go before him and I present my concerns to him, and he may help me there, right? But that's not what it says. God promises a little level higher than that. Doesn't he say, trust with all your heart, and he shall. He shall direct your ways. But you have to be all in on this, right? You can't be halfway. You know what I mean? Like, 1 foot in and 1 foot out, and you're kind of standing there straddling, and, I want the benefits of God, but I also want my comfortable life. I don't want to be all in. I want to be part in. You know what I mean? Okay? He says when you're all in, he'll direct your paths. And when you're all in and you acknowledge him in all your ways, God shall direct your paths. That's his promise to you. You don't need a psychic, a fortune teller, or a palm reader. You can go directly to God and know that he is with you. Praise God for that, isn't it? It's way more certain. Daniel 2, verses 7 through 12 says that the king said to Nebuchadnezzar, let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will give its interpretation. The king answered and said, I know for certain that you would gain time. In other words, you're stalling because you see my decision's firm. You want some time, right? My decision's firm, though. King, if you just tell us what it was, we can make something up. You'll believe us like you always do, right? Just give us something so we can say whatever. These are inventive people, obviously. They had a position because they were able to take some little thing that the king said and make it flowery and really make it believable, right? And he'd sit there and all flattered and enjoy it, but this is not the case here. In verse 9, the king said, if you do not make known the dream to me, there is only one decree for you. For you have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me till the time has changed. Therefore, tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can give me its interpretation. And the Chaldeans answered the king and said, there is not a man on earth who can tell the king's matter. They were right? Therefore, no king, lord, or ruler has ever asked such things of any magician, astrologer, or Chaldean. It is a difficult thing that the king requests, and there is no other who can tell it to the king except the gods whose dwelling is not with flesh. And they were right about that, right? This is true. Unless God, the real God in heaven, instructs us, there's nothing we can do. I can't do anything about that. I can't tell the future, right? I can't tell you what's going on. For this reason, the king was angry and very furious and gave the command to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. Now, here's where the things get sticky for Daniel, right? Don't forget that Daniel, evidently, he was not there in that group. And Daniel and 3 other young Hebrews, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, as their Babylonian names were considered to be part of the king's inner circle of counselors, okay? This is where, when I do the Daniel seminar, I cover in chapter 1 all the information about these 3 guys. But I'll just briefly touch on it for you. Their Hebrews' names were Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, okay? Those are the 3 Hebrew friends of Daniel. And shortly before this, Nebuchadnezzar had attacked Jerusalem. And he destroyed lots of it and killed many, many people and took back with him slaves. And from those slaves, he chose really bright young men, he said. And he wanted them to train them and get them and go through the school of Babylon so that they would be pampered, right? They'd be kind of like, okay, now you're my friend because I've let you in instead of being out in the fields working as a slave. You're working with me in the palace, a great privilege. You're going to learn the language of the Chaldeans. You're going to learn all the stuff that we're teaching you. And so we're going to eventually probably send you back somewhere so you can kind of control the land where you came from, loyal to us in a way. That's how they did it. And it was, people were bright back then. They had their ways of indoctrinating people and controlling things. And the same thing they were doing back then. And among them were Daniel and his 3 friends, and they were very highly regarded. When they got to Babylon, they distinguished themselves before the king. Okay? In chapter 1, you can see when they had an issue with food, and they said, no, we're not going to have that stuff. And they were 10 times better by keeping a really healthy diet. And then King Nebuchadnezzar was very impressed with them, and they were very close to him. And so they must not have been in maybe that little group there, because we see later on what happens here. Now, when the king said, kill all the wise men, he meant everyone, including Daniel. All the wise men, Daniel and his 3 friends, everyone. So what's going to happen here? They were all doomed, all of them. What do they do? Let's find out. We jumped ahead to verse 17. Then Daniel went to his house and made the decision known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions. That's when the captain of the guard told Daniel. He went there because they were going around killing people. That they might seek mercies from God of heaven concerning the secret, so that Daniel and his companions might not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. So Daniel and his friends sought the mercies of God, right? What's another word for that? They prayed, right? I hope that, when you come to difficult times in your life, you're going to do the same thing, okay? Prayer is something that you develop over time. You work with it every day of your life, prayer. And you work to get to a point where it's so important in your life, it's more important than breathing. Prayer is so powerful. You'd be doing it morning, noon, or as Dave would say, evening, morning, and noon, right? Prayer is very, very, very important. In other words, they went home to pray, and if you forget about everything that is mentioned here tonight, if there is one thing you can take away, it's that you need to pray. You need to pray and have a prayer life, okay? Talk to God. Anyone can do it. Even if you can't speak, you can pray with your thoughts. God doesn't ask you to come before him with the Gettysburg Address or the I Have a Dream speech. You have to be great orators to say things in front of people, right? Just talk to God. Peter was sinking one day, was he not? He's walking on water and he's sinking. And he cried out to Jesus and said, Lord, save me. 3 simple words. As he prayed out, Jesus heard him and he answered Peter's prayer. I encourage you to pray and be heard by God. You will be. And in so doing, you can be certain that God will hear you. Okay? Learn to pray. Pray, pray, pray. We are here and God is where when we pray. Where exactly is God? We pray and we're getting on our knees and we pray in whichever way. We're driving, perhaps we're praying, or perhaps we're praying and in the shower, or whatever we're praying. God, he's in heaven, right? But where is that? Well, it's up there. It's a long, long way away. Let's try to give it some context, right? Some context. The Milky Way, our galaxy, is 100 light years across. And that means if somehow you get to the edge of the Milky Way, right? You're on one edge of the Milky Way, and you want to get to the other edge of the Milky Way, we'll just say, right, of the galaxy. And you travel at the speed of light, which is 186,000, all right, 292 miles per second. 186,000 miles per second. It's pretty fast, don't you think? That's around the Earth 7.5 times in 1 second, okay? Imagine moving at that speed. 186,000 miles a second. If you could travel that fast, right, for 100,000 years, you'd make it from one side to the other. From one side of the Milky Way to the other. 100,000 years. Put it this way, if when Adam was created, right, according to the Bible, about 6,000 years ago, right, and he began traveling from one side of the Milky Way to the other at the speed of light, by now, he'd be about 1/16 of the way across, okay? Very small amount of the way across. That's how big it is. Yeah, barely gotten past the word go, right? And that's how big the Milky Way is. And the Milky Way is just one of billions of galaxies in the universe. Yet from beyond all of that, when you pray, God hears you right away, immediately. He hears you. He hears you and he wants to hear you. And that might seem unfathomable, doesn't it? But it's magnificent. The book of Job is a question. Canst thou by searching find out God, right? Can we little human beings, right, really fully understand and appreciate all that he has to offer us, all that he does for us, his magnificence, his grandeur, all that is God? Can we really comprehend all that? We cannot. God is vast. He's so far beyond us. So far. His ways are so far above us as the heavens are above us. Okay? He is magnificent, and there are things about him that we can't explain, and I'm glad about that. Okay, I'm glad there's things we can't explain about God. While we may not be able to explain everything about God and answer every question about God, we'll find out tonight that he will challenge. He'll challenge those who are skeptical about him. That's what this study is about. Daniel and his friends prayed to the God beyond the starry sky, and what did he do? Verse 19. Then the secret was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. So Daniel blessed the God of heaven. That word then, okay? Remember, he prayed. Read about pray in the prior 2 verses. Then the secret was revealed, okay? As a response to his prayer, the secret was revealed. See how important it was? He was not going to reveal any secret unless they prayed. Then the secret was revealed. Very, very important to remember that. What happens next is that Daniel is brought into the presence of the king, of course. Nebuchadnezzar, a mighty monarch at the time, the most powerful man on the planet, and he starts to explain his dream to him. Okay, I want to see if I can click on this and get this going. No, it didn't work. Yeah, it should work. Okay. He said, "You, O king, were watching, and behold a great image." No surprise that God would relate to an idol worshiper, right, with showing him an idol. That's how God reached him, right? He was an idol worshiper, a pagan god, pagan king, worshiping false gods, and he uses an idol. Daniel says, continues, "This great image, whose splendor was excellent, stood before you, and its form was awesome. This head's image was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. You watched while a stone was cut out without hands, which struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed together and became like chaff from the summer threshing floors. The wind carried them away so that no trace of them was found. And the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This is the dream. Now we will tell the interpretation of it before the king." So here's the dream. You see it behind me as well. As I move out of the way, you can see the same dream right here, and we'll refer to this in other nights as well. Same exact dream, feet of, as he says, of iron and clay, legs of iron, belly and thighs of brass as you move up. And then you have the chest and arms of silver and the head of gold, this image that was there before the king. Then he says, "You, O king, were watching." I went through this already. I'll cover this right here. Okay. Okay. Now I can imagine now, as he said that. Can't you picture this? That is, Daniel was telling everything. Every word he said was bringing back something to his mind. Every word he said was telling him, yes, that's exactly, that's it. That's it. That exactly. Imagine how he must have felt when he forgot something and someone else told him what he had dreamed the night before. Remember the jaws that were dropped open, okay? I can just imagine him saying, okay, this young man knows what he's talking about. He's edging up on his seat. I want to hear exactly what he has to say. That's the dream. Now what comes next is really, really, really important. And God's going to reveal to us what is going to take place from that time period over the next 2,500 plus years, 2,600 years to our time period right now. That was around 600 BC or so when that happened. And he's going to tell us something that no one could ever tell. Ever. Okay. You, O king, are a king of kings. For the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. And wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field, and the birds of the heaven, he has given them into your hand, and has made you ruler over them all. You are this head of gold. Now, God is helping us understand this, right? We don't have to kind of plug in some kind of confusing Bible puzzle and try and figure this out, what it's saying here. He simply says, you, right, Nebuchadnezzar and the kingdom you're representing, right, Babylon, you're this head of gold. So now we're learning right away that the statue represents something. This idol, that he was an idol worshiper, he uses this idol to teach him this. He says, you're the head of gold. Now, what did the head of gold mean, since there was multiple metals there, right? Gold, silver, bronze, steel, right? Iron, and iron and clay. What did it mean? It represented Babylon, right? That great kingdom that was in charge and ruled from 605 BC to about 539 BC. They ruled basically the world where God's people were. That's where they ruled. That's you. You're the head of gold, he said, right? Babylon was powerful. As a matter of fact, a cuneiform tablet that was found contains a letter from Nebuchadnezzar, and it says this, an actual letter they found, which is awesome when you find something buried in the sand that talks about the words from that king that we find in the Bible. The whole earth was prostrate at Babylon's feet. The city which is the delight of my eyes, which I have glorified. May it last forever. And that's what Nebuchadnezzar thought. Anyone would think that Babylon was never going away. Okay, so he's saying, you're this head of gold. That's right. This is exactly what he thought, because this is his words, right? His exact words that he wrote down on a cuneiform tablet found later. He says, Babylon's going to last forever because it's such a great, great, beautiful kingdom. There's ancient wonders of the world. You have the wall of Babylon was such a marvel, the wall of Babylon. The hanging gardens of Babylon, these are wonders of the ancient world. It was a beautiful city. It had a huge wall all around it. It was, at some places, 20 and 30 feet wide in some places, and it was very high. They could race chariots around the top of the wall. And they had it all the way around this city. It was so heavily fortified, and they had the river Euphrates passing right through underneath. Okay? And that was where they had water, and they had so much food built up. Anyone who was trying to attack them, they could sit there for years. And they were so happy. They said, oh, no, do whatever you want outside. We'll party inside, which is what they did in chapter 5. Yeah. But after this, though, those are some words that Nebuchadnezzar didn't want to hear, right? But after this, another kingdom, you shall rise another kingdom inferior to yours. In other words, Daniel's telling Nebuchadnezzar, you're out of the way at some point. Babylon will be replaced by the chested arms of silver in this thing here. You're gone. Someone else is coming. Ooh, that didn't sit too well, I'm sure, with him, right? That's the Medo-Persian Empire. And what's happening here is that the Bible is interpreting itself. That's what we want it to do. You don't have to guess what the head of gold, the chest of arms of silver represents. The Bible tells us. The Bible itself explains what it is talking about. When you're looking into prophecy, look for those verses that explain what the important symbols and the signs mean. And the Bible itself in Daniel goes all through that and saying that this is a kingdom. The head is a kingdom, and then another one inferior to yours will come. So it's a kingdom. We know that the arms and chests are a kingdom. No guessing. Okay? The Bible tells us. Medo-Persia would follow after Babylon. But even Medo-Persia wouldn't last forever. This is all in your history books. You can see this. It's exactly as he predicted. Exactly as he predicted. And a little interesting tidbit. As I said, I go off in tidbits with Daniel. But people didn't believe that Daniel was written when it was written. It's supposed to be the 6th century BC. Okay? That's like 600 years to 500 years before Christ's time. People said, these kind of things here, that's just made up. It's all made up. They even have a king mentioned in there, Belshazzar in chapter 5, and he's nowhere recorded in history. The Bible's making this up. This was probably written 2nd century, maybe after Christ's time. No one can prove it, that kind of thing. Even though when Jesus says, read the book of Daniel, he says in Matthew chapter 15. That would have been in the 1st century. But how can we know that it's before that time? Well, the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, right? Little boys tossing up a rock up in a cave up in Qumran, in the outside of the Dead Sea area, and he hears something break, and he calls the people. They check, and they find all these caves, many caves with many, many scrolls in them. And the book of Daniel's there. And this is then dated back because the people of the Essene Jews were out in the desert for about maybe 60 years or so, just copying the scriptures from about 165 BC to maybe about 100 or so. And so this was before Christ's time, at the very least. But who were the one who recorded all the history for us? Greek historians recorded it. Okay? And we're going to get to that right now. 1 second. The next one coming up. Another, a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. Right? Does anyone know who that is? Greece. These people here were the ones who were the historians. Herodotus and many other ones who recorded a lot of stuff in history. And that's where a lot of our history began. Other than a cuneiform here or there, or maybe a hieroglyphics here or there, mainly the historians were the Greeks, somewhere about 3rd century BC, 2nd century BC, around there. And that's where we get most of the information. And the Greek historians didn't have Belshazzar as the last king of Babylon. That's false to say. So the Bible's made up. Well, after they spoke a little too much in the sand, what do you think they found? A stone that said Belshazzar. He was the last king. What does that tell you? Why is that important? Because the Greek historians who started recording things in the 3rd century, 4th century BC, this was 6th century BC when Babylon was toppled over and Belshazzar died. It was lost to the world. The only thing that recorded was the Bible. The Greek historians were wrong, and they found out later they were wrong. So all the people who are skeptics say, wow, the Bible told what was true. We can believe the Bible. You can trust it. You can trust the book of Daniel that it was written back 600 years before Christ, and that these kingdoms that are coming up after were foretold way before they happened. The young man, 33 years old when he died, Alexander the Great, you may have heard of him, right? He ruled Greece from 331 to 168 BC. He defeated the Medo-Persian Empire, and at 33 he met a tragic end. Another young king met a tragic end at 33 years old. I don't know if you can think of who that could be, maybe. A young king of kings. One king who conquered the world for himself, Alexander, only to lose his life. Another king surrendered his life over so that the world could gain life. Isn't that awesome? Also, Alexander the Great's army was known as the brazen-coated. Homer in his book, The Odyssey, called them the brass-clad Greeks, right? These metals aren't picked out for nothing. They have a lot of meaning to them. And here the brass was what the Greeks used. Silver was what the Medo-Persians used for money. Gold was everywhere in Babylon's place. It's superlative gold. Okay, so we find three kingdoms ruling in succession: Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece. If you were to guess that, we have the head of gold, right? We have it here, head of gold, arms and chest of silver, belly and thighs of brass. We have this iron, legs of iron. What do you think that would probably represent? Kingdom, kingdom, kingdom. Maybe a stab in the dark, perhaps another kingdom, right? Wouldn't that what it be? Another kingdom. And the fourth kingdom, verse 40, so there it is, shall be as strong as iron. Inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything, like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all others. All others. Rome, Greece was eventually vanquished by Rome, right? And this is pagan Rome, depicted in Nebuchadnezzar's dream as legs of iron, and historians even refer to Rome as the kingdom of iron. When Jesus was born, it was a Roman decree for a census to increase taxes, right, by Augustus Caesar that led to his birth in Bethlehem, right? Roman iron for swords that killed innocent babies by Herod at the time of Jesus' birth. Roman iron spikes that were used to crucify Jesus. Roman iron for the spear that went in his side. Okay, the Roman iron. I had a chance to go and check out Rome, and all through Rome a number of years back, and here's the Colosseum. Really enjoyed my chance to see Rome and all the history that's there. Now keep something in mind. This was all predicted years, many years before it happened. Rome came into power in 168 BC, but it was predicted 400 years before that, 440 some odd years before that. It was predicted in advance. God accurately predicted these four kingdoms rising and falling before they happened. And we would probably predict that a fifth was to see them, but God didn't say there would be another kingdom after the emperors of Rome. Verse 41, it says, whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay. As the feet of this picture here, you can see, as we had up earlier, is iron and clay together. They don't mix too well, do they? Iron and clay. Okay, you can just like, like water and oil, you sit there and stir the cup, right, and you let go, and that's after a while it spins, and they separate, right? They sit there and they're separate. Just like iron and clay, you can mix them as much as you want. They're not going to mix. God plainly said that Rome wouldn't be conquered, right? Because in the feet it has what? The same iron from the legs. So there's the Rome still involved, right? It wouldn't be conquered, but instead it would be divided. So what did happen to Rome? Rather than another great world power coming and demolishing Rome, Rome fell apart. Fell apart from the inside. Fell apart over the centuries. Had the longest reign. It was from 168 to around 476, they say, but they were still hanging around a little bit here and there for the next century or two. But 476 is the date that most historians pick as Rome's time of being up. Most of these would be because the Roman kingdom was where Europe is today. Notice there's 10 toes on that image. Western Rome was divided at 476 to 493 AD into these 10 tribes. I'm not sure if it's a coincidence or not. 10 toes, 10 tribes, the Alemanni, the Anglo-Saxons, all the way down. You can see the names that were where the major Roman Empire was in Europe today. And And those are all, you can see some of these, Alemannia, the Germans, Anglo-Saxons, the Britons, etc., the Franks, French. You'll see that they are there, and the Suevi, Vandalites, and Visigoths are gone, okay, uprooted. So the kingdom shall be partly strong and fragile. And as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile, it says in verse 42 and 43. As you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. Okay? They will try to reunite Europe, but they will fall down through history. Many have tried to do that. You have Napoleon, you have Stalin, you have Hitler, many other ones, Charlemagne, different people all throughout history tried to unite Europe, and they couldn't do it. They could never do it, right? Napoleon was thwarted where? Because Waterloo, right, happened. And so Napoleon couldn't take over. He really wanted to take over Europe, and he almost did. Joseph Stalin, Hitler were trying to do the same thing. They were on a quest to unite Europe. There was a time when Queen Victoria was known as the grandmother of Europe. King Christian the Ninth of Denmark was known as the father of law in Europe. There was so much intermarriage between all the people. They tried to mingle. Your son from your country, to the king, marry my daughter, etc., etc. That way we can have all one big kingdom. And that went on. It says they will try to, the seed of men will try and come together. And it won't work, God says. It won't work. His word said it 2,600 years ago. He said it won't. It just won't happen. You can try as much as you want. It's not going to happen. People told me this 15, 20 years ago at the European Union. It's going to happen. And that's, got some really problems right now, right? They're not together. You try and tell, okay, they got the currency, right? Oh, we got the euro. But I went and visited Europe, and they had very different customs, very different ways of approach of everything. The countries were still very, very unique and independent, not merged together in any way whatsoever, not unified. Just for business purposes they did that. That's the only reason why. So there's so much intermarriage, and it did not succeed. And today, people are trying to unite Europe through diplomatic means, but it hasn't happened because God says they will not cling one to another, not even as iron is mixed with miry clay. During World War II, Franz Hassel, he was a soldier in the German army, and he was sent to the front lines. He was placed there because of what he was teaching. He was a conscientious objector. He didn't want to fight, but he was forced. He was in the German army, and he wanted to fight the war, but he was prepared to serve his country in some way, okay? So they thought they can get rid of him very quickly on the front lines. We'll send him up front, gone. Okay? And during that experience, he received a command from his commanding officer to come into his makeshift office they had out in the field, and he was asked a very pointed question. He said, do you think Germany is going to win this war? This is the Franz Hassel. And Hassel had been given some Bible studies, right? He had been giving some to different people, to some of the other soldiers. He's given Bible studies to them, and so the commanding officer had heard some of the things he was saying, and now he's putting it to him. Do you believe that Germany is going to win the war? Tough question, wouldn't you think? You're a German soldier. You're being asked by a higher-up German military officer to answer that question. And he wanted to know. And Hassel paused for a moment. He didn't exactly know how to answer because he could, end up wherever, in his court-martial and perhaps even death, whatever. He prayed for a moment, then suddenly he had an idea. He asked his commanding officer, can this be something off the record? Can I tell you something that's not on the record? And he said, okay, we can take your hats off, he said. That's the way to do it. Take your hat off, and I'll let you answer unofficially. Unofficially. They had an unwritten code in the officers group. You do that. You can do that. You can, talk off the record. So Hassel took off his hat, pulled a small black Bible out, and started to cover Daniel chapter 2 that you covered tonight. He started covering that with his commanding officer. He started going very carefully through it and explaining the prophecy that we just read here. He had a small piece of paper which he unfolded and contained the image that we see behind me right here, of the arms, the head of gold, etc., the arms all the way down. And Hassel went through the whole prophecy, explaining him everything. And when he finished with the prophecy, he got down to the feet of clay and the iron that didn't cling one to another, didn't cleave one to another. And he says, this is Europe, and this is in the time that we live in today, this feat of the image. This is what we live today. And he said, and just as iron and clay don't cleave to one another, I can be sure that Hitler cannot win this war, he said. There will not be a Third Reich that will last 1,000 years as promised. Okay, he's told him that. And there was a long pause in the office, and his commanding officer asked him for the Bible. He said, let me see your Bible, hand it over. Requested that he come back the next morning, and then dismissed him. Of course, you're probably going through his mind, what's going to happen? Wouldn't you be nervous at that point? He went to sleep, and the next morning at 9 a.m., he was commanded to come into the commanding officer's tent. He went in there, And there was 2 other high-ranking officers in there with him. Uh-oh. And he didn't recognize them. And at that moment, his officer took his hat off. You know what that means, right? Took his hat off, told everyone to do the same in the room. So they all had their hat off, and he said that nothing would transpire past this room here, this little makeshift office here that we have, never be repeated. And he handed Hassel back his Bible and said, I want you to tell me everything with these gentlemen here that you told me yesterday, and don't leave out a detail. And Hassel opened up again to Daniel 2, went through the entire prophecy and every detail, and when he got down to the feet and iron mixed with clay, he said, Hitler will not win this war. Hitler will not win. This is not a Third Reich that will last 1,000 years, he told them. And Hassel was dismissed. And as he was heading out of the door, his commanding officer said, oh, by the way, I want you to know that this commanding officer right here, he used to be a professor of history in the college in Germany there. And this other one over here, he used to be a teacher in high school of history. And they both corroborate exactly what happened in history that you said. I just want to make sure, that everything was right. He's confirmed all the dates and all of the kingdoms that you have described in your study. And he says, you're free to go. You're free to go. Heard Hassel. And Hassel left rejoicing that he had a chance to witness, right? Everyone likes a chance to witness in some way and share God's word with these influential men. And he knew that God was faithful. He knew he was. 6 months later went by and the war had ended, and Hassel found himself in the middle of Russia. He was over 1,000 miles from home, and he was worried about how he's going to get back home. But unbeknownst to Hassel, right, his commanding officer had begun 6 months earlier when he got that study from him, right, to save every ration of gasoline that he possibly could as his commanding officer, because he had been convinced that that Germany was not going to win the war. He was convicted by Daniel chapter 2 that Germany was not going to win the war. Can you imagine the pressures and thoughts going through people's minds who were in that war and who were officers in that war, and what risk they're taking by putting gas aside and believing in Daniel chapter 2? They believed in it. They had trust in it. How about you? Okay? So Hassel, then he took Hassel back with him with the gas he had. I mean, all the way back. And he became a minister, Hassel, there, and he was one of the first ministers back on duty serving the Lord in Germany after the war ended. Okay? We want to go back now to the Bible, to the story of Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar as we wrap up. And God said that 4 kingdoms would rise, and then a 4th would be divided. Right? We saw that already, the 4 metals and the feet of them divided. God predicted it, and that's exactly what happened. The Bible has demonstrated tonight that it does not make mistakes. God predicts the future. No one can do that. No one can predict the future. Years ago, I was an engineer. And I remember I was in a new job. I remember an atheist sitting behind me. And next to him was a Christian. They were buddies, and they would always go at it back and forth. And I was new in this job, and I'm sitting there. I don't want to talk too much, but I'm sitting there keeping my nose clean. I was an engineer, but I was not a mechanical engineer, but I was hired for this. And they knew. They said, you have to learn the whole job. I understand that your degree was electrical engineer. Here's mechanical. And I'm sitting there going through it, and I don't want to bother anyone, but I always hear the conversation behind me back and forth of the atheist and the Christian. And one time, the atheist said to him, this young guy, he's very bright. He said, you Christians, once you take the Bible out of your hands, he said, and you go talk to somebody from some other religion, you lose. I said, what do you mean? He says, he told a story about a grandmother taking a little daughter to school or to church, and said, so-and-so said in class today that, the Bible is true. Grandma, why is the Bible true and not the Quran or from the Muslims or that kind of stuff? And why is not that God's word? And he says, well, because it is. You just got to believe it. And you see, he said, when it comes down to when you're arguing about what religion is more true, you can't use the Bible. You have to put it aside, and that's when you Christians lose, he said. And someone told me, I was sitting there for months, I'm saying, what am I doing in this job, Lord? What am I doing here? I don't want to speak up because I'm learning, but so I stood up, and I turned around, and I said to him, that's when you have to go to the Bible. That's when you have to go to the Bible. He says, the guy looked at me like, what? I said, when you're dealing with somebody from another religion and they don't believe in your Bible and the Christianity, that's when you have to go to the Bible. Come on. I told him about the Dead Sea Scrolls. He heard about them. I said, that's when the book of Daniel was proven to be before Christ's time. You will see later on in Daniel chapter 9 that the Bible tells you exactly, hundreds of years before, and I told him this, exactly when Jesus was going to begin his ministry and when he was going to die. To the moment when he was going to die. hundreds of years before. And I explained that to him, and I sat down. And the room was full of, there was 13 engineers in that room in cubicles. They were always talking all day. They're all just talking, talking. But you could hear a pin drop for the next 15 minutes. And I had goosebumps. I said, whoa, I didn't expect that. You know, I was quiet for months there. I didn't know when I was going to get the opportunity to witness, but the Lord provided that. And the Lord can provide for you as well. God tells the future. We should be able to then what? Trust the Bible and everything that it says. Everything that it says. Okay? Remember the former things of old, for I am God and there's no other. I am God, there's none like me. Right? Declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. Sure will. He declares the end from the beginning. No other religious book does that. Only the Bible. Only the Bible declares the end from the beginning. You know, friend, you can have hope tonight in a world that is spinning out of control, as it is, right? This world is spinning out of control. The same Bible that paints an accurate picture to this day that reveals all those kingdoms coming forward is the same Bible that tells us that we can be in God's hand and be very well protected and safe in his hand, that he knows things that's going on. He knows the end from the beginning, and he has a really good ending, okay? He has a really good ending, even though there's mess going on, and mess will continue for a while until Jesus comes back. He's not a distant God, he's a close God. He answers your prayers. You can go to the bank on this, okay? Just not Madoff's bank. You can go to the bank on this. He is with us. Prophecy reveals where this world is headed. God saw it ahead of time, and there's a perfect future ahead for you and for me. The world seems to be tumbling, doesn't it? Into this catastrophic, this direction off into nowhere. But the best is yet to come. There's someone who sees beyond the trials and travails of this world, and he tells us that there's peace that will come. He tells us that. Will our children and grandchildren know peace? Yes, they will. How do we know that? Because the Bible prophecies tell us that. There will be peace, a time of peace. There will be heaven for us. It's real. That will be there for us. They're reliable prophecies. They're accurate, even though they were given centuries ago. But we have one last part of Daniel chapter 2, right at the end. And in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. Babylon came and went. Medo-Persia came and went. Rome is gone too, right? Greece is gone. They're all gone. And then one day, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, as his word says. The kingdom shall not be left to other people, as it says there. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Inasmuch as you saw that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The stone that comes and destroys all those kingdoms is none other than Jesus Christ. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure. Isn't that awesome? You know, you can just always count on God's word. But when he says the dream is certain and the interpretation is sure, he took it from 2,600 years ago all the way to our time and until Jesus comes back, the stone that comes in. He's not leaving anything unturned, no stone unturned. Jesus is coming back and destroys everything that's set up here. The Satans of the kingdom of Satan of this world will be destroyed. And his kingdom will be set up and last forever. That's certain and that is sure. Very certain and sure. God can be trusted. If there's one thing you can walk away with tonight with, aside from you need to pray, right, is that God can be trusted. God can be trusted. The Bible can be trusted. And Daniel chapter 2 is one that shows us that in a very basic way. Whatever you're going through in life, God hasn't forgotten about you in any way. He remembers you. He knows you. He's not unaware of what's going on in your life. He knows what's going on in your life. He knows he has a plan for you. And soon, very soon, that rock is coming back. And that rock is Jesus Christ. Is coming back. And soon a new kingdom, a new world will be set up. Soon will be eternity for those who love God. This is good news tonight. This is good news. The Bible is true. God's word is true. The dream is certain and the interpretation is sure. The best is yet to come. You can trust in God. Isn't that an awesome thought? The truth is that God wants you to be part of what he has waiting for you. He wants every single person here to be part of it. He offers it to everyone. We're going to cover more about this later on in another night. And tomorrow night, don't miss tomorrow night. You come back and you'll see the signs of what's going on in this world. Some of the things that are kind of shocking you will be revealed tomorrow night. And as I mentioned, Joseph will be presenting, and he will present God's word to you. You'll see the signs, and you will see that God is love, that God has everything under control, and that God cares about each and every one of you. Let's stand, if we can, and pray before we head out. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we're grateful for your goodness to us, your mercy toward us. We're thankful for forgiveness and love and answered prayer and all those wonderful things that you provide for us. We know, Lord, that your word is true. It can be trusted. We can trust in you. And we pray as we head out this evening, you give us safety in travel and bring us back here tomorrow at 7 o'clock so that we can learn more about your plan for this world and how you have everything under control. Bless each one here tonight with a blessing, Father, as we head out. To your honor and glory, we ask all these things. In Jesus' name, amen.